But we could, if we keep it short.
It's nice that it can make things and it's like so that I can cut it off on some
Like if I just start, people come later.
All right, thank you everybody for coming tonight. Ted, we worked out all the technical glitches tonight. He's going to run smoothly. First, we have Ted Hall.
All right.
No announcements or anything? I wish. I'm just going to talk about what I'm trying to accomplish in the next couple of days, which is a topic that emerged from the time I was here before, wondering about how to make our tools, our digital fact tools, more usable for artistic, creative types who don't have a lot of experience in it. So that gets transferred to the idea of being able to manipulate the tool in real time in a way in which you're actively engaged. And it's going to be one of the most terrific examples of being engaged with using a machine or a tool that really enables humans to be productive. And if you see somebody operate one of these backhoes who has a good skill set, they are true artists. Yeah, I don't know where the sound even comes from. Good. Yeah, thank you. Anyway, working these tools is like art and craft, and the person doing it is exhibiting a kind of artistry and creativity that is a different kind of workflow than our flow for digital fab tools at the moment. And I love the way he finished things up there with, you know, that texture use of the tool that made that a pretty breaking pattern. So the digital fab workflow goes from an interaction with software, often creating a visual image. That's as close as you actually get to being engaged with the material and the process and what's going on. And maybe that's fine. I mean, I'm not sure how this really ought to work. But, you know, it ends up that a lot of the work is done at the tool itself, which in particularly involves controlling the acceleration, deceleration, and sort of smoothness of movement of the tool. And so part of the deal, if we're going to be involved with making it work in an interactive way, is to manage that acceleration, deceleration, kind of smooth operation. That normally happens because we take that design file and compile it, and the digital fab tool pre-processes it, deals with all the acceleration, deceleration, smoothing, and all of that. So if we're going to engage in things in real time, we've got to figure out how to deal with that and then move on from there. So I'm just demonstrating here, most of our digital fab tools, additive or subtractive, have a couple little buttons that move the tool around. And that's about the extent of the engagement that you have. We're getting better and better and do, you know, things to like simulate spinning the little wheels that you have on a milling machine and things like that. I'm just demonstrating what that looks like on our tool. It looks like that on other people's tools too. You can have a real spinner or a virtual spinner, and that's just an example of a virtual spinner. So the first two kind of opportunities, if you're creating a tool for somebody to engage with, is we've got to deal with sort of that stopping and starting that the machine usually takes care of, getting a way for that to be smooth while an individual, a creator, is actually engaged in manipulating something that then leverages the physical capabilities of the tool. So starting and stopping comes first, and smoothing direction comes second. And I have been thinking about dealing with that using this is an example of actually moving around a pen. You can see here, I'm leading the tool, and the tool is moving with only a very slight lag. The problem here is figuring out how we can create a minimal lag or a comfortable lag or an adaptable lag. You know, it's like humans can learn to move around a room with prisms in their eyeglasses after a while. We can learn to live with lags. We have lags in our life. I mean, our nervous system is a big lag anyway. So we just need to create something optimal enough so that you can engage with it and actually accomplish something. So, like in one day, I think we're at stage 1 and getting that to work. Here's kind of moving it into 3D. You can't see too much on that screen, I don't think, but basically, there's a cursor moving around in 3D with input from a leap, and is starting to move the tool. What I haven't got yet is the more interesting stuff, where we start plunging into the material when we're doing these things, but also taking advantage of the fact that we can sort of set limits and help the creative person. We can create kind of guide rails, tracks, limits to depth, width. We can create little fences for motion. And more importantly, we can do things like enhancing. We can add the equivalent of paintbrushes, and create more options for what you can do as you engage interactively with a digital fab tool. And of course, then there are all sorts of possibilities for recording what you do, repeating what you do, replaying up to a point and changing it, and so on. So I'm kind of excited to play with it. Everybody come by, and I actually have something working that you can move around. Yeah, so I'm like right about here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm kind of the other half of Shopbot, and a lot of people know me as Shopbot Sallye, Sallye Shopbot. Shopbot is not my last name. And on the other side, I also am a glass artist. So I work in fused glass, and I have that aspect. I'm also a research scientist by training. So there's a lot going on in our household. I came into Shopbot kind of kicking and screaming when Ted said he wanted to do this business. My response was, "Aren't you cute, honey, with your little business?" And he asked me to come and answer the phone 2 days a week. And after about 6 months, I just looked at him and said, "You have done this truly amazing thing in creating really one of the first affordable digital fabrication tools." Shopbot has been in business for 26 years.
Yeah.
And think of what was happening 26 years ago. No good CAD programs, or good CAD programs, but no good CAM programs. Computers were slow. So there's been huge changes in all of this, including in the way that Shopbot itself looks. There's kind of 2 different ways to think about machines. So one member of our household thinks about machines of, if you build it, they will come. And at the beginning, it was like, and they'll know what to do with it, and they can figure out how to use it. Another person in the household says, let's do project-based things, let's do problem solving. This is something you can do with it. So this is giving examples of how you can create something, what you can do with it, and here's instructions in how to do with it. This was never more apparent to me than the Fab meeting in Boston, when for once Ted and I were both at the same meeting, and we had the HandyBot, the lovely little portable CNC machine. And there were several on display, and I would put out the indexing tool because it had an indexer, and I would come by and indexing would be gone and the machine itself would be on display. And I'd be like, who took that down? And then I would put it back up and put up the display, and a few minutes later, finally after several hours of this, I said, who's doing this? And Ted said, oh, the machine is so beautiful, I just want to show the machine. And I said, but people don't know what to do with this machine. So I'm not really in the right thing because I don't build the machines. I just try and tell people what they can do with them and realize how wonderful they are. So I have done things with theater departments. This was actually a set for Duke University. This was the first trial of running the PRS, the first PRS, kind of the early version of the current machine. 8 hours a day for 3 weeks to make this set, and it worked. I do a lot of work with artists who molding and casting. So this is North Carolina Central University is the oldest historically black college in the country. And they wanted to take a parking lot and take a manhole cover and turn it into their centennial medallion. So it is taking their logo, translating it into a model, and then they could take that model and put it in sand and resin, remove the model and cast it in bronze. And then taking some of the early pre-V-carve, this was pre-Vectric, but the people who did the CAD program, really puffing that up and doing a three-dimensional vector-based design program. So it is graphics-based as opposed to engineering-based. Working with the Fab Foundation over the years, I've had a wonderful time working in different Fab labs. And this is at Marmot, I believe.
The Navy,
Yeah, Navy. So they had a shop on it. They did not have a stand for it, so we designed a stand. We could prototype it in another tool. So take the same design, squash it down, put it on a laser cutter to be able to prototype it. We didn't know how thick the material actually was, so being able to run some files that you could do different thicknesses of material and put it physically on your plywood so that you were able to figure out what the slot size should be. So it's using the tools and the design for different tools, prototyping right there, and then building it, and everything fit so well together that we were able to press fit it using that huge rubber mallet that always comes in the Fab Lab. So my plan here, I'm not building this machine, but was to add the rotary indexer to the existing ShopBot in the CNC and to document as we're doing it. We got it up. We actually, I'm really happy. I'm sorry I call this a nerd fest, and it makes me very proud because people are very devoted, whether they're artists or whatever they're doing to be, and I'm happy to be this. I love the way down in that lab we have been doing technology sharing, so taking the iPhone, figuring out how to scan that, turn it into a 3D file. We took it, did it in 3D, we got the rotary indexer going. Those are our results. Now I am free, so I'm going to play, and if you guys want to help me or have some things, talk to me, but I'm not going to spend the rest of my time in the Fab Lab.
Well, I asked Tom last night, what should I talk about? He said, talk about what's exciting. So, because this is about machines, I get excited developing useful machines and doing infrastructure that has capacity to unlock superpowers. I've done some things, and I sort of gathered, I was like, I could talk about some things. But I'm interested in this idea of infrastructure as an art form. So So I'm going to start with one that inspired me. So in 2007, Lars and Jens gave this presentation. You can download it by searching Building a Hackerspace. And they set it up as a design pattern. And they were like, here's the infrastructure pattern. You want to build a hackerspace, what should come first? Infrastructure or projects? Think in your head. Infrastructure, projects. Anybody want to take a wild guess?
Both at the same time.
Nope. Make everything infrastructure driven. Rooms, power, servers, connectivity, and facilities come first. Once you have that, it'll all work. They set up these patterns, including the shower pattern and other ones, that were really just a delight. And we use these, and we just literally deploy these patterns to make NYC Resistor in New York City. I started this with another 8 people. And a bunch of interesting things continue to come out of it. It's still going. This sort of shifted because Americans don't really like the word hacker, so makerspaces sort of took over, and I'm really proud of this as taking somebody else's infrastructure and deploying it and making a good example of it, and then encouraging other things to happen. I didn't start the other like 2,000 hackerspaces. I don't want any credit for that, but I love that we planted a seed and like did a good example, and then other people did it. Another one of this idea of art infrastructure as an art form. I did this project where I was inspired by this instant art grants thing where a guy in North Carolina, he's in a big community, he's very artistic, and he was like, I'm gonna give away money to transgendered black artists. And I was like, okay, I'm in a much smaller community, so I was like, okay, I'm gonna do Peak Scale Art Grants. We'll give away $5,000 for in a week to get black artists shown in peak scale, because all the buildings and all the galleries are all white, and it's like it's a third black, a third Latino, and a third white. So I was like, there's something missing here. So I was literally like, I'm just gonna, if you have a cool project and you're black and peak scale, I'll like figure out, tell me what it needs to get over the hump, and we'll just do it. So Ocean was like, I've had this project I wanted to do to put up my collection of Black Lives Matter photography, and I just need a place to put it. So I got a building, and it was a month-long like thing that we got the building for, and the building's still empty and the art's still up. So like Peak Scale went from like not having any black representation artistically in the town to being like saturated. This is Andre Culler Jr. This is his mother called me up and it's like, my kid is 16, he's got some learning disabilities, and he just draws all the time. I want to support him. So I was like, okay, let's give him a grant. And the nice thing about having it being super, like, it wasn't through a nonprofit or anything, I was just like, okay, what does he do? Okay, he draws like Family Guy, copies of Family Guy all day long. He's really good. I was like, well, I want to get his work up, but Family Guy is not really like a good representation of, it's like a white show, as white as you get. So I was like, I don't know how you're gonna communicate this, but let's engage with the topic here. And she was like, it's time for me to have the talk with him then. And he put up his work, and I gave him a $500 gift certificate to Amazon. He bought markers, and it was like, awesome. So I was like, okay, this is cool. So I guess just to go back a little bit, like this idea of like creating some infrastructure, I copied the structure, I documented it. Interestingly enough, he's gone through some challenges. The original person who did the grant went through some challenges. So now peakscaleartgrants.org is the place where like all the good documentation is if you want to do this kind of a thing. Which isn't like, there's probably only like 5 other people who will do it. 1 minute, check. I've got so much to talk about. So this is Affirmative Club. I talked a little bit about this. One of the things we learned about Affirmative Club is when you talk about your art in Affirmative Club, you can only say good things about it, but people in general, when they talk about their work, really disparage it before they talk about it. So we had this idea of share the preamble and the postamble. Don't talk about your work until you show it. Talk about ask for forgiveness afterwards. So that's the end of infrastructure as art, and I have a whole other thing that I was hoping to get to, which was this idea of a world without money. And so I'm just gonna like do this. I look forward to talking about it.
Are you?
Oh, is it me? Or is it-
I have Alan next.
Oh, good. I just wanted to prep you.
Maybe my, what's it, your motion
emotional support.
Yeah, I'll be your most. You should talk about a world without light.
There's a presentation already, actually.
Yes. Hi, I'm Alan Grover. That's my cute cat. People like it. It says it's a manifesto and a question. It's kind of a lie. It's not quite a manifesto. Okay, PHP and its online resources. It's a programming language. If some of you don't know that, like maybe ours said, it's a disaster from an experienced programmer's viewpoint. But it's got this thing where they copy and paste code. They post stuff all over the place. It's this community-supported norm. But the actual copy and paste, like literally they copy and they stick it in. It does it badly, but it's this community norm of doing it. So what if we took that seriously? This is a quote from Hegel. You can go look this up. I translated it to German. It's there. C++, Arduino programming, right? Some of you know about that. That's an error message from it. No normal human being should have to deal with this stuff. I went to see the Laurie Anderson show, and I've always loved that. That's cool, so I fixed it up a little bit. Semantics, meaning. So what I'm kind of hinting at in a lot of these things is composability, which is plugging things together meaningfully, making them connect with the meaning. The meaning is part of the connection. This is what artists do, right? All about meaning. Many artists, maybe not every artist. So you're obviously saying to yourself, what if there was something that studies composition and gives us formal tools, because we're all into like using formal tools, right? To do art, great art, and fun. That would be category theory. What if you couldn't make a syntax error when you're doing algorithms and programming? Leo had this formulation which I really loved. If you've used Grasshopper, it tries really hard to do something useful, even if like it doesn't quite make sense. It's really hard to make a syntax error. What if you could just cut and paste something? Just go grab a chunk, put it in your algorithm, your program, and it would mostly work. So there's something called XOD, XOD. Mostly works. You can just grab chunks. So my not real manifesto question is, what if we had something algorithms and programming and finding and just using those pieces was much easier. I help teach art students, and they don't have the programming skills, so a lot of it falls on me. Let's see, do we have one more? Eugenia Chen teaches category theory to art students at the Art Institute of Chicago. You should go look her up. She does baking with category theory. She's written some books. Her videos are very entertaining and informative. I really like John Baez. I think he's really great at explaining things, even these very interesting math problems like category theory. And he's inspired kind of a generation of people at the Tokos Institute to do applied category theory, to bring it back to some of the things we do. Like all these diagram languages, electronic schematics is maybe the most familiar to people. This is my CV. All the images on the left were projects I worked on. And I probably didn't use hardly any of my time. Is that okay?
Exactly.
Really?
Thank you.
I'm done. Thanks. Hey everybody, I'm Mark Mary. I think I've met or spoke with or introduced myself to most of you. I'm really, really humbled to be here. Actually, these are all my heroes, and thank you for having me. The views are amazing. I think what's really amazing actually around here is all these paths that safely get us into our cabins and studios, and but what I really appreciated was all the little exits to get you off your prescribed path to go into something a little bit more dangerous and far more interesting. So I thought that was a little bit of a metaphor of what we're doing here. And the other view I get every night is this lift your fears from Amelia, who's in the rafter above my bunk. But I noticed that Amelia was in 2019. She has no idea. Oh, Amelia. The other wonderful note I see, of course, is that Haystack food. I disagree. The food is fantastic. The farts are no different. Anyway, a lot of people ask me why I'm going to end here a little bit about how I got into this. I never really thought I would be in the wire bending business. It's not really what I intended at all. I have a design firm, and we made one of these to demonstrate our skills, not at all to be in the wire bending business, but people wanted to buy it. And what we really do is we create product experiences that enhance people's lives. Like this is a free solar charger for your phone that we deployed through city parks in New York, and we had about 50 of them, and they were in every major park in New York. It's because they, at the time, they put free Wi-Fi in, and all of our batteries were going dead. And then Sandy came up and destroyed New York, and they removed all the payphones. So it was safety, it's communication, it's connectivity. So we really thought it was important. So we put these out there, and people liked them, and we ended up selling that little company as a venture. And what we're really trying to do is create these complete solutions that are compelling, right? This is a blood glucose monitor that is not just a good looking blood glucose monitor, because it's a pretty low bar. It's there to make you feel better and really transition you from a feeling of consistent, constant sickness to a feeling of health. And it's a lot like a weight scale, and if you're on a diet, is always there to remind you that you're fat or that you are achieving your goals or perfect as you are, right? I mean, it's not the function of the scale, it works the same, it's the design and the experience. And so that's what we really like to work on. But we have to work on it every day, and it's difficult at times, you know, to be creative all the time. So I always really love this quote from Chuck Close saying that inspiration is for amateurs, the rest of us just show up and get to work. You sign on to a process. And it's kind of true, because if you're sitting there waiting for the lightning to strike, it may not strike when the client is coming. So, you know, really, what is the process, and what is it that we're doing, and what am I here actually working on as a process? The artist that influenced me the most is my dad. He makes very large sculptures, and I know immediately you're all thinking, this wirebender business is it's a daddy issue. And I don't know, now that I see it, I'm really thinking about that too. So it was a summer job. This is what we did as kids. We would build these things and piss off our dad, and that's where I learned to make stuff and be creative and be an inventor. So really, I work at this intersection of design and invention, and you know, we can make a razor that's beautiful, but it's got to work. And the only way to do that is you make a ton of them. And as my favorite professor would say, Marco, mock it up before you fuck it up. And that's a problem for me, because I was the kid who glued my hand to the airplane and destroyed both my hand and the airplane. So the thing is, when digital fabrication came along, it was such a relief, because now I didn't have to worry about my craftsmanship and really work on the idea, right? Like I need to evaluate the idea, not how good am I at carving. So 3D printers, CNC machines, laser cutters, CNC routers, they really help me, because I could really focus on mounting it up. But in that process, we realized these are really good at volumes over here, these are really good at planar forms, and in design they teach you line, plane, volume, you can create anything. So what about the lines? So that's why we made one.
1 minute.
Oh, that's good, I didn't make it. And that's why people wanted it. And these are some of our customers. You know, there's people who are artists, there's people who are in the medical, dental fields, there's prototypers that are making dish racks, there's all sorts of parts that I never really knew what they were because they told me it was for secret stuff. And they all work very, very differently. These people have a different workflow, they have a different reason for being. So the question isn't, can we bend your shape? Yeah, we can bend your shape. I don't have that problem any longer. That took me a while, but it's good enough. So what we're working on here is what's the experience that you want in your workflow from art to part. And we're learning a ton from you guys. It's really helpful. So some people want to be able to draw and pull. Some people want to import. They want primitives. They want to work with parameters. These are just some software ideas of what we can do and how we can take it. So that's what you guys have been helping me with. So thanks all.
I only want to make one argument. The machines are not the point. It matters what you do with them. I spent a lot of time making machines and often forget. And so I'm trying to remind myself, and also all of you, we're not making them just to make them. It matters what you do with them. I was talking to Jonathan Ward earlier today. I think lots of you probably remember him. It's a machine that we made that we used the ShopBot to make and showed many times in the ShopBot booth, making a machine with another machine. And here's a machine I made with Ilan. Hot tab, pop-up 3D printer, the MakerBot extruder on it, and also other tools that could be put on it. And it was really cool. We carried around. I still have a machine. I don't have any of the things that we made on the machine. Actually, that's probably not true. But here is a machine that I made with James Coleman using the network controllers. This is 2010. We're doing network controllers then. We're still doing network controllers and experimenting with what it means to reconfigure the infrastructure that goes into the machines. Reconfiguring the machine, why'd you pause? Reconfiguring the machine and the parts that go into it, and thinking about how that makes machine building itself, PowerPoint, how that makes machine building itself easier or more reconfigurable for lots and lots of different applications. And those of you who sit through Fab Academy probably have seen this video before. But this was the cardboard version of the stages made with James, with the reconfigurable controllers, reconfigurable stages, so that you can make lots and lots of different machines. Can I do this? And lots of people made lots of things with them, and the applications were silly, which at the time I was like, yes, we really did it. We made it so that machine building was so easy that in a week assignment in Fab Academy or How to Make, people were making all kinds of machines to do all kinds of really silly and weird things, like putting ketchup on their omelets and like mixing cocktails and stirring their coffee. And I was like, great, this is, we made it. Now everybody's gonna just like make automation do things that they want to be doing. And I do think that that was important, but then we weren't actually doing things with these machines. It was like getting to a moment of understanding we can build machines and we can do different things with them, but we're not at the point yet where the things that we're doing with these machines matter that much. And I haven't figured this out yet, but still ongoing. So I still do machine building. This is a machine for my group at UW, a machine agency that Joshua Vasquez designed, which takes a lot of the same principles. It's modular, the controllers can be configured to do different things. It has a tool changer, you can put different heads on it. You can start automating different types of workflows there, or you can do inspection and fabrication in the same workflow, pick things up and do things like picopan microscopy, but it's all still the same stuff. We did this also in 2010. And really want and 3D printing has been such a driver for making machine building maybe more popular. I think that machine, the Jubilee machine, which is also open source like all the previous ones were, has been replicated by lots of people because it is a 3D printer and 3D printing is now super popular. But I want much more. So, you know, right now, one of the things that I'm interested in is, what does it actually take for someone to adopt automation in their workflow? What does it mean if you're a chemist, or you're a biologist, or you're an artist, and what you care about is not the machine. You're not like me or Ilan or, but we really care about the thing that comes after it. What needs to go into it where we as machine builders are really going to make a difference for that. And a lot of it is like not seamless workflows. It's not figuring out what they need for them, but it is, we've tried to invent this new material, and 3D printing this material is possible, but we need to do so much process tuning and so much parameter tuning, and all of the tools that you're giving me are like just like a mess of bash scripts and like pieces that we have to like cam here and do other things here. And I don't care that your controller is modular because there's so many other things I have to do. I want to pick up these plants. It's great that you know exactly how to move around, but how do I know where the plant is and where to pick it up? How does that integrate into everything else? I'm a clinician, and I want to be able to start creating different kinds of ways in which I can identify when there's malaria in my blood, or something else. And how do you really enable developing this type of workflow? It goes so much further than just moving the head around, but integrating into all of these other processes. So, I don't know. I've been really trying to make it, this is a P5.fab programming 3D printers directly from P5.js, P5 Blair Subron in my group, where it's like, how do you just really play around with how you can use machines in different ways, integrate them into different processes, and really experiment with what the workflow is and could be, instead of just trying to make everything seamless. So that you can 3D print things that don't necessarily just try to be an approximation of a digital model. So yeah, that's really all I wanted to say. I think it really matters what we do with the machine, and everything that we do in terms of building machines, I think, should be in service of that.
Right, so I didn't get the memo apparently, so I'm going to talk about machines without any message. It's just machines. Okay, so let's go. So that's my background. That's the start of my new life, my current life. I could talk about stuff prior to that, but not so interesting, I think. I'm a researcher in Brussels, and I do Fab Academy in 2020. So Fab Academy is the global version of how to make from Ilan. And I was really amazed at just all the stuff I was able to do all of a sudden. And yeah, so I hacked this CNC machine to do sand drawings. There was this photography thing. I also learned processes with which I was really uncomfortable with prior to that and even after that, like more than interesting. But yeah, it was tons of fun. And since then, I'm an instructor for Fab Academy in Brussels. And in fact, that same year, there was the instructor bootcamp in Canada, and the Woo project started there. So if you're wondering, Woo means little ant, and so it's this idea that this machine is going to be made from modules that barely know anything about the global machine, but you know, together we can make something, make a process. And we made an iteration of this machine when I was fabricating students. We were only 2 students, so you can imagine in only 4 days it was a little bit tough, but we produced this flexural version. And there was my module here, which was the modular microcontroller. So there's that, and then I realized I was spending a whole semester spending taxpayer money for having fun, so I had to do a little bit of research, or at least pretend to. And it's my Academy final project. It's a live field 3D scanner, so you put on objects, and it moves around, takes pictures, and I published a paper about that. And then, I'm not sure how, but I ended up in the machine building class. Actually, I know how. It was Jake right there. He said I could sit in. So I can also thank the pandemic for that. I feel terrible saying that. But the class was online, so all of a sudden I met all of those amazing people. I made this board. It was a notorious failure. But then there was this guy who said he wanted to do BCD with me. So that's another topic for another day. And then in December, I was at CBA for just a week, and we made this iteration of the Ubuntu again together with Rob. And this is what's happened. So we had a Core XY motion system driven entirely from a Python code. Every single step that the machine takes is a byte through a USB cable. I think it's kind of mind-blowing. And then, just this January, there was the instructor bootcamp. Neil was supposed to be there, but sadly couldn't make it. So I decided to spread the word about Ubuntu, and we made a few iterations of that. This is a 3D printable version. I mixed the names up. Actually, it's Batman from Armenia who made this version, and Ivan from Barcelona who made the Haystack version. And I just made a capacity piano because I felt like it. Also, we saw amazing Northern Lights in Oulu, Finland. And this year, I only had 1 student for Fab Academy, but we still managed to do an XYZ version of the concepts. And Neil said the machine had to do something, so I just strapped an RGB LED and I could do light painting this way. Yeah. And also, I saw that the Ubuntu concept was slowly spreading. So people are actually using it. It's mostly the mechanical part that's successful because using this fishing line is really so simple. But we have progress on both fronts. That's it. You see that?
That's a driver.
As I briefly mentioned, I started in Neil's lab in 2006, and I was brought in by someone named Carrie Lynn as an undergraduate researcher to help out with building the mechanical parts of this test bed. This is an Internet Zero network with 100 nodes. And I remember finishing this pulling all nighter, and afterwards Neil said, that's a nice box, essentially, but I'm really excited for whatever you're gonna do next. And I meant it as a compliment. I think it was motivating enough that I stuck around for my bachelor's thesis at CBA and worked on rapid prototyping of rapid prototyping machines, so how to make it easy for people to build their own machines, so they can get machines that are cheaper, also to get machines that maybe aren't exactly what's available commercially. And so this is a PCB mill that was meant to be an order of magnitude cheaper than the Della, and a networked control system based off of Internet Zero. But it was really in 2009 that I really got into machine building, and that was through a class called How to Make Something That Makes Almost Anything. I had spent a lot of time on that previous machine at PCB Mill as a mechanical engineer, designing everything really carefully, doing a lot of analysis. And then for the first week's assignment in this class, I was actually working outside at the time at a design firm, and I told myself I'm going to lock myself in the design firm's model shop for a weekend. And I'm going to come out of here with a machine, no matter how crappy it is. And this actually turned out to be maybe one of the most influential experiences I've had, both the class for sure, but also building this machine. So this is a 3D printer, 3D prints in Catcher, and it's made out of foam core. And there were no digital fabrication tools used at all in building this. And just a couple snapshots of the process. There's a cap stand, which also you could kind of tune. The guitar, you can write notes on the foam core, you can cut it, you can throw it out, you can glue it back together. So a really kind of, to me this is machine building as a medium for understanding what it meant to use tools. And so that's kind of a theme that I've given a lot of thought to over the years. Ever since back then, what is the difference between a machine and a tool? What's the overlap? How do you really build tools? And I worked on a little booklet. It's a little bit kind of weird, but it's a booklet about this topic and about using tools and how kind of there's two options. You can either build better tools. If you want to live in a world where everything feels like it's clay to your hands, which is maybe something that I think tools help us do, to take hard problems and make them soft. Then there's kind of several approaches to that. One is you build better tools, and that's what I've spent a lot of time focused on. Or you change kind of the definition of what you're trying to make. And I think a lot of them, both sides, require a lot further exploration. And something I'm still thinking about a lot to this day. I remember, so this booklet I worked on over the course of several years. It was overlapping with this digital fabrication working group at the Media Lab, and several people here, including Nadya and Jen and Bre, were in that group. And I remember Jennifer looking at this machine. This is several years later, and hope you don't. I'm not going to quote you exactly because I don't remember exactly what you said, but something along the lines of, "This is really cool. I'd love to see you do more stuff really related to that." And it's always stuck with me. I've been trying to pull myself back in like what was so magical about this experience. But I don't know the answer to how to reproduce that exactly. I spent a lot of time thinking about it, so I'm going to spend the rest of the time talking about making machines. So that did evolve. That foam core machine evolved into several other iterations. And something that ended up living on to this day is we realized that for especially 3D printing, it was important to have low inertia to move it around. So we put the motors stationary on the outside. And that lives on today on the Ultimaker. Back in 2010, I thought I'd share this photo because it's kind of fun. Although there were two photos, one was everyone smiling, but everyone's eyes were closed. Everyone's serious with their eyes open, so I went with that one. And it was a really nice time back then with a lot of overlap between the commercial community and people building tools they were going to sell, and then within MIT. And Jonathan Ward's in the background there, Eric Brun from Ultimaker, and then Bre and Zach from MakerBot. So one project was Fab in a Box. This was the idea of putting an entire Fab Lab into a suitcase. So it was a XYZ platform with multiple tool heads that you could put on. Then Nadya and I, like she mentioned, we built Pop Fab, which put the entire thing into a briefcase rather than a suitcase. And the original idea for this was to do guerrilla urban interventions in Berlin as part of a BMW Guggenheim exhibit. So this is one of the interventions. We built a Lost and Found, and this is that Lost and Found 3 years later. And I have a photo actually of several years after that. Another project was, so I took new textiles and I started working on all my assignments. I built machines for the assignments to build the assignments for me. And this is a fabric CNC machine. It never actually ran, but it was kind of the first machine that used Core XY. So this is kind of like the beginnings of Core XY, and it folded up into a carry case. Then something called Interweave. This is a braiding, computerized braiding machine where you load different bobbins with yarn, and a close-up of what that looked like as the yarn was being formed.
Zero it.
Okay, and I'll just close with this one. This is a friendship bracelet weaving loom. And this is kind of a collaboration between you and the machine. You did the moving the thread back and forth, and the machine handled the hard part, which was controlling which threads are up and down. So we'll close on that.
Thank you. Okay, here is me a few years ago. This talk is less about machines maybe and more a little bit about where I am and what things that I've done and things that I'm doing this week. So how do we do this? Here we go. So I'm a maker of things. My background is in experimental physics. I've done some very practical things with medical devices in a company that actually did lots of these digital fabrication things 20 years ago and introduced me to it in a way. Spent time at Harvard doing science education, created a makerspace there really as a result of taking Neil's class in 2013, which has been a tremendous experience. This addition of digital fabrication to my background has made life much more interesting and given me lots of things to do going onward, which is interesting now because I'm no longer working at Harvard. I've retired, but I'm still involved at Harvard and trying to figure out what's next. One of the things that's been important to me is impact, especially teaching digital fab at Harvard. And one very random example is a student that we had this fall. Actually, one of the most compelling pairs of projects. In the fall semester, she made this sort of traditional knitting machine that knits 3 stitches at a time. I thought she did a tremendous job and told her at the beginning that it was impossible to do such a thing in the fall semester. She went ahead and did it beautifully, and then went on to do something much more impossible, which is a crochet machine. In knitting, you knit everything at once. In crocheting, you have to do it sequentially, more or less. And so if I can, this actually is going to work pretty well. It's worth seeing her video. She ended up with 4 or 5 stepper motors, a bunch of servo motors. This is a very early video that shows basically that she tried to figure out how to mimic what a human does when a human crochets. And the things that she's doing with her hands, she had the machine do later by adding solenoids and servo motors. And finally got to a point where she got a machine that could do increases, decreases, and single crochets, and turn to do another stitch with about a 50% success rate. So, I thought that was worth taking a few minutes to. Okay. There we go. Okay, sorry, here we go.
The last one.
The last one?
Oh, no, sorry. Oh, it's
Sorry about that. We'll try to stay out of YouTube now. I was a PDF here. Okay, good. Good. No, I don't. So the other thing that this has led me to is some involvement with art, which I had not had much of before, and many collaborations. And I think it's worth just talking a little bit or thinking a little bit about what these collaborations are like. This is a project called 50 Springs, in which balls on springs were oscillated at varying frequencies. The frequencies swept so that the resonance moved from left to right in the bouncing balls. It was an interesting collaboration because it was one in which the teaching really went both ways. My collaborator Kim was an artist experienced in how to get projects going, how to do things in a practical way, how to actually make things happen. I provided the microcontrollers and the technical information, but we shared and we learned from each other. It sort of showed me the optimal way to do collaborations between two people with different fields of expertise. A little pot here, which had RGB LEDs, which similarly over a 20-minute period of time slowly shifted in color. And a funny project based on a microphone and a piezoelectric buzzer called Buzz and Mike, which were connected through a microcontroller to do interactions based on a feedback, a positive feedback loop. Lately, a collaboration with Quentin and with Neil, based on the Arungu controller idea and a very basic minimal machine based on string and pulleys, using the Core XY geometry in, I think, a very nice way that we hope will allow students to, again, do reconfigurable simple machines and do useful things. One of the things I would like to do this week is to use a machine actuator to play a clavichord. One of my projects over the COVID period has been putting together a clavichord kit. Clavichord is a string instrument, keyboard string instrument in which a metal tangent strikes a string and stays attached to the string by force, defining the length of the string and the excitation energy of the string. So as you move it along the string, you can play on one string different notes. In a keyboard, you just have different keys playing the string at different positions. I think it would be fun to do this with a motor and see what can happen, because that excitation is kind of an interesting process. And here's my start, which I made in the beautiful wood shop in Haystack, where I would like to live the rest of my life. So, thank you.
Hey everyone, my name is Jake. I am one of Neil's students. I've been with him now, I think, coming up on 5 years. And it's been a great time. I came in just as Nadya was leaving, so I became sort of the de facto machine person. I started a few years prior with Saul Griffith at Other Lab, working on the other cutter, which was a Jonathan Ward thing that we then sort of accidentally started another machine company, which became Bantam Tools. I actually filmed a Kickstarter video as an intern, so they invited me back to do things that I was unqualified for, like design $50,000 metal laser cutting machines, which was low cost at the time, and still is pretty good for the money. Since then, yada, I showed up at the CDA. This is my current baby. We've always wanted a machine that you could, you heard Ilan and Nadya talking about the same idea. One machine, multiple tools, easy to make, fab in a box, all that stuff. So that's Clank. You might have seen it down in the graphics studio. And Clank is unique amongst tool changing machines for having an entirely 3D printed tool changer. So you really can, with maybe a BOM of sort of unique set of parts, numbering in 5 or 6, and an FDM printer, you can have a tool changing machine. And so there it is, picking it up, putting it down. It's printed, but because all the contacts are metal, the repeatability on the tool changer is 6 microns, which is unreal. Super stoked about that. But I work on sort of all of this stuff. This is really the trouble with machines, is that there's a little bit of everything going on. Han was talking about composability. I think that's a really good way to think about it. You want to be able to throw anything in any layer in and have it do something, and that's really difficult with machine architectures because you have, these sort of 4 or 5 disciplines playing with each other. Of course, the actual design of the thing you're trying to make, all these different physics sort of fighting each other. Maybe systems need to go together. And particularly with open source hardware, this becomes super interesting because you need to have coordinated operation of the things you put together, but you also need to do specialized engineering on each of those components. So you want to be able to do that without coordinated developments. It's a really difficult sort of production model question as well. And in general, you want to go from accessible fabrication, where the things you need are on machine scale, towards accessible automation, where the things you need to build are on the factory scale. So you have, you know, even more layers of shit starting to come together. So this is Nadya and Ilan. They introduced this idea of sort of object-oriented hardware, where each thing that does a thing is an object in a system, and you address it in a similar way to how you treat software. And then Neil wrote mods around the time I was coming to the CBA, where he was sort of becoming obsessive about data flow and doing everything with data flow. And so this is Clank. It's made of a bunch of different modules. You zoom on the end effector, there's even more modules. And then we needed a way to control all this stuff. So we put graphs and everything, and then everything is graphs over networks as well. It's graphs all the way down. So this is how the FDM controller works, where in a lot of these processes you also want feedback. So the FDM controller has a couple sensors. They all go to a thing that thinks about how much to turn the motor, and then that turns around and tells the motor how to work. And that all happens in the very low level. So it can be very quick, which also addresses these problems of like real-time control that Ted was talking about. Anyway, so it's messy, so how do you program it? I've also been writing a front end for it. So on the left is the embedded thing, it's spinning out orientations. On the right is the computer program that's rendering them. You plug it in, it tells you what it is. You can drag outputs into inputs, and you can sort of mess around with it as you build it. So this is, again, composability. I was really excited about someone talking about that. Because that's the whole idea, is that you just sort of throw things into your network, and then they pop up, and then you can mess around with them right away. And the next thing I'll be building is a type system, which lets you accidentally throw a Boolean into an integer and have it still do something. And yeah, really importantly, nothing knows what anything else is before you plug it in, and there's sort of a graph reversal algorithm that runs around and looks on the network for new stuff, and then asks it what the name of each of the things in it are. And then this UI, it's overlaid in the video, but it's rendering in a browser. And then, so this is sort of Hello World button project. You pull the button output from one and onto the other and another. And then this is lots of them working together. So I think I'm almost over time, but you can do lots of different parts. There's no limit to how big the graph can be. There's only a limit to how big the packet can be that can describe the revenue in the graph. So there is a natural limit, but it's sort of amorphous. I think I'm done. 1 minute? Okay. So this is what like motivates me to keep doing it, is this idea of pure production, building complex stuff together. This happens all the time in software, critically because there are really good interfaces between contributions that people make to sort of what we call a commons of modules. So when you're writing complicated software, you only need to write a few percent of it. But typically when we do machines, you need to do the whole thing. So the idea is that we have this sort of composable system of all the stuff. Everyone can make their little part, others can pull it in and throw it into systems, and it can work. So yeah, that's it. I'm Jake.
That was it.
Okay, that's it. So questions down in the dining room. James will run morning meeting. Come to start at 9. I'll be out all morning doing Cloud Academy. Go and enjoy. What?